Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel on behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations, Career Development, and STAT. I am excited to continue our awesome panel series. My name is Sharon Olubajo. I'm class of 2023, and I'm thrilled to be the moderator for tonight. Before we get started with questions, I'd like the panelists to introduce themselves with their name, class year, what you studied at OU, where you attended grad school, and what you studied or are studying.
I can start if y'all want. Hi, I'm Katherine Carey. I graduated from Oglethorpe in 2017. And while there, I was an English major. And I had a minor in Shakespeare and Renaissance studies. And I'm currently in law school at Emory Law and in my second year studying law.
I'm Gandy. I graduated in 2018. While I was at Oglethorpe, I majored in business administration with a minor in politics. And I am studying law at the University of Michigan School of Law. I'm in my third year, so I graduate in May. Woo!
All right, I think I'm the least ripe fruit out of all of us. I just started, so my name is Iris Ponce. I also graduated in 2018. I got a BS in physics. I did a post-baccalaureate, so I just did research for 2 years because I needed that for grad school. I did that at Columbia. And then I started at Yale in this fall. So I'm rolling in Zoom school too. So after 2 years of going back into school, and it's just online, so adjustment.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Now let's dig into the questions. Any of our panelists are welcome to answer, but don't feel obligated to answer every question as we move forward. So let's begin. My first question for you is a reflection of your time at OU. What is the one dynamic club, organization, or course from Oglethorpe experience that has benefited you in your career or time in grad school?
I can start. I was super involved in the Student Government Association while I was at Oglethorpe. I was freshman class president and then treasurer. And then I was president my senior year. And I think that was super beneficial in going towards grad school to get a lot of experiences in a super collaborative environment. And particularly for law school, the job of student government is to advocate for others, and the job of an attorney is the same. So it gave me sort of a nice experience to lean on as I started studying law.
Yeah, I think for me, it was probably some of the work I did as a student ambassador in the development office. I was sort of in development and alumni relations, but focused on development, and did a lot of communications work with building kind of a family and parent newsletter that went out, and then a newsletter to donor communities, different groups for the university. And I think that was the first time that I sort of had I sort of was bridging student and sort of professional, and kind of having to develop some professional communication skills, kind of just office experience, those sort of things. And I think that was really valuable for me. My first job out of undergrad was working in communications for a nonprofit. I did that for about a little over 2 years. And so that was really valuable. I was doing some development work at the nonprofit too, so kind of the fundraising experience from being at Oglethorpe was helpful as well. But I think most of the things that I did, there are skills that aren't necessarily directly translating to my law school experience, but just skills, everything that I did, I learned a lot, and kind of, helped me get to where I am and the skills that I'm still learning now. And some of that was, theater and music stuff. So performing arts things that you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, like, lawyer, but, those things I'm finding helpful too.
So for me, I was a little bit more focused on science through while I was at OU. And I think the the thing that helped me the most was I did an honors thesis, and that really allowed me to explore doing research at a, a level that's less crucial than when you have to do a thesis, like a big thesis for graduate school. But also I went to conferences, so that definitely helped a lot. And then I think as I took my upper level my classes, those are hard, and just being uncomfortable with having that experience of being uncomfortable with the subject and having to work really hard to understand it is what I experience now. And so it's it would have been harder had I not been exposed to that in undergrad. So that was good.
Thank you. Next question we have is, tell us a little bit about the grad school process for you. How did you decide what school to attend, and what was the application process like? How does grad school compare to undergrad?
Okay, I can go if you want. So I would say this. So I was just telling them before, I had a weird, not a weird, but a different path to this. And so when I was in the bridge program at Columbia, they helped us a lot in the application process. They knew it was something that was big and it's a big decision. So they had a platform for us. Like I think when it came down to, I had a huge Excel spreadsheet of all the information of all the schools I wanted to apply to. And so I had when the applications were due, how much it would cost, how many letters of recommendations they wanted. And when it came down to choosing what schools I wanted to, that was a little bit easier for me because I work in particle physics, and in particle physics, you have big experiments. And so there's a lot of universities working within the same experiments. So I went into one of our publications, and then I saw all the schools that were listed as part of our authors. And then I was like, I like this school, I like this school, I like that school. And then I made sure that they fell under what I wanted. Like it wasn't too cold or wasn't too hot, and that it was in a state I would be seeing myself living. And then I like just being very organized, because that was the second time, that was my second rodeo with the applications. And the first time I lacked that organization. So Excel spreadsheets are very good at keeping just that everything. So you just sit down and look at everything you need, and it's right there. And then I divided them by like, this is my reach school, this is a school I think I could definitely get into, and here's my safety school. And then I was picky on where I wanted to live, which some people tell you don't do that. I I did that. But yeah, just Excel spreadsheets. It's what worked for me.
Yeah, I kind of had a different process and experience. I didn't intend really to go to law school when I graduated. I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. And I wound up kind of in the perfect place working for the nonprofit Girl Talk that I worked for, that I mentioned earlier. But I knew that I loved the people in the organization and their mission, but I didn't want to be doing that forever. It was kind of just, it was a great learning experience. And I feel like we did a lot of really valuable work, and I'm still involved with them, but it gave me the space to figure out what I did want to do longer term. And so I guess after my first year or so with Girl Talk, I took a little bit of a hiatus, and I attended something called the Columbia Publishing course, because I was sort of deciding if I wanted to go into sort of book publishing or to go to law school. So my parents are lawyers as well, so that was kind of in my blood, I think. But I was figuring that out, and so I did this 6-week program at Columbia, New York, and figured out that I didn't want to live in New York and to be in publishing. I'm sorry, Reese. To be really involved in publishing, you sort of have to be there. I don't know if that's changing with remote work, but everyone else was also asleep when they were talking about contracts and subrights and, licensing things for publishing. And I was really interested, and that kind of said, well, maybe you should go to law school. So then I started looking into that. And my boyfriend, who's also an Oglethorpe grad, Evan Drew, was in his first year of law school at the time. He's at Emory as well and is a 3L like Anna. And I kind of was got to see his first year process. And we had been in Atlanta for a long time. I sort of didn't want to make a big move geographically. And I liked everything that I saw that he was doing, and I was really interested in that. And I liked the way that Emory approached their program. So I actually only applied to Emory Law, which was a huge departure from what I had done for undergrad. I applied to like 12 schools maybe for college, and before deciding on Oglethorpe. But I just decided to make my life easier, and thankfully they let me in. So here I am.
Yeah, I had a fairly opposite journey from Katherine in a lot of ways. I knew that I wanted to go to law school pretty much from the time I was in high school. I don't have any lawyers in my family, but I just was really interested in that kind of work. And I sort of confirmed that impulse as I was at Oglethorpe. I got to intern with several different places, one of which was the Georgia Innocence Project, which does very similar work to the stuff that I am doing now in law school. So I took the LSAT the summer after my junior year, and really dedicated a lot of that summer to studying for the LSAT because that's a big component of the law school application process. And then I applied to schools in the fall of my senior year. That's not super common for law school. I'd say most people are more like Katherine and have taken a couple of years off, particularly in my class at Michigan. And then I applied super broadly because I was terrified that no one was going to let me in. And that wasn't true. But I applied to probably 15 law schools, and all across different like quartiles. I also had a very thorough Excel spreadsheet with things like average GPAs for a class and average LSAT scores for a class. And they were color coded based on how likely I thought I was to get in. And then none of my color codes were accurate, I will say. There were schools I never dreamed of getting into that I got into, and schools that I thought this is the easiest shot, like of course they'll let me in, that I didn't get into or got waitlisted at. Michigan was one of those like I'll apply, but there's no way schools. So when I got in, sorry, I was so excited. And I ultimately became between a couple of schools, but Michigan really was the right fit just in terms of the type of career I'd like to have, which is primarily public interest focused, which you don't see at a lot of these bigger law schools. And it's been a great spot, even though it's not ideally geographically where I'd like to live. So I did not follow Iris's plan in that way.
Oh, wait, before I forget, I wanted to add something with the application process. So something that I was really shocked was how expensive it is, but at least in physics and STEM. But what I found out is that don't let that deter you. If you talk to the people, like there was one class I ran out of budget and they were like, did you apply? And I said, no, I don't have money for it. They just waived my application fee. And so for most schools, if you explain the circumstances that you're in, that's what I was told by my friends too, they will they can waive your application. So that's because I I added it up and I was like, oh boy, this is something. So don't let that scare you or take that into account, but they can definitely, something that can be waived. So just, I forgot, just plugging that in for anyone.
I would say that's true of a lot of grad programs as well. If you reach out to them, even if it's not explicitly about a financial issue, you know, if you reach out and express your interest, or if you attend an admissions event or something like that, a lot of times they'll give you a fee waiver code or something like that, or they'll email it to you. Or yeah, I mean, be upfront and just ask, because they also know that it's expensive and they understand the situations that people are in. So don't let that be a bar to applying.
Thank you. That's all great advice. So we have some questions from the audience. Someone's asked, as a STEM major, how important is the GRE when applying to grad school?
Okay, so I would say it depends on, okay. So that's, it's a pickle. It's a little bit of a pickle to answer that. So first, it depends, I think, on what STEM you're thinking of, right? So for example, in physics, we also have the physics GRE. And so for more traditional schools, they still require it. I think for the most part, most schools are going away from saying, if you don't have, this is the minimum score that you need to get in. Like the first time I took, don't let it scare you. You have to practice for it. It's kind of like the LSAT. You have to do it. You have to get it out of the way. Like the first time I took it, I bombed it. This test, I took the test, and they literally spat back at me saying, you didn't study physics at all. So because it's hard, it's a new test. That's why you should take it. I always recommend take it in April for the first time to get a sense of what it feels. And then prepare for the real deal in September and October, because specialized topics like physics, chemistry, bio, they only do those 3 times a year. So you have to take advantage of them. I will say other schools, like for example, I know that Harvard, Yale, not Columbia. Columbia's a little bit picky about it still. They're slowly, like I said, they're moving away from like, if you don't get this score, you're not gonna get in, and more looking at more of like your entire experience, at least with the standardized test. I would say for the GRE, yeah, they just have to do it. They don't love it. It doesn't, it's really frustrating because it doesn't say how good you'll do or how well you'll perform, but it's just something you need to get through with it. So I say prepare over the summer. Some schools are picky about it. I think right now, because of COVID, most schools are thinking of dropping the requirement, or most schools have dropped it, and I'm hoping that it's there to stay. But yeah, if you need help and advice on like how to prepare, we can definitely chat about it. On like my experience, given that I bombed it the first time and then I prepared a lot, and I did okay after that. I hope that helps.
In case anyone's wondering, I think that's somewhat true as well for law schools, that they're sort of getting away from how much weight the LSAT carries, or some schools, you can apply without taking the LSAT, which again, I mean, it's kind of the same as what Iris was saying, that it's not, in my opinion, it's not a great indicator of how well you'll do in law school at all. I think it has very little bearing, almost no bearing on how you do in law school. Because I know people who did amazingly on the LSAT and they struggled when they got there. And I know people who didn't do as well, who immediately did really well, and people who, were kind of just in the middle. So I think that's changing a little bit for law school as well, but it is still one of those things you have to bite the bullet and just take it. I had to take it 3 times to get a score that I was like, I feel comfortable enough applying to this one school that I'm going to apply to get in. And I was, working. Yeah. So, it happens and people understand. And then it's kind of like, once you get into college, nobody cares what you made on the ACT. At least in my experience, I got into law school, no one cared what I got on the LSAT. It didn't matter. And it's not going to matter when I, graduate and that kind of thing. And exactly what my GPA is in law school isn't really going to matter once I graduate either. Once I get a job. But yeah, so it's just one of those things but yeah, if anyone wants specific advice on that, I can talk.
Yeah, so we do have a question in the Q&A that is related to the LSAT, since we're on the topic of it. So Amisha asks, what did you do specifically to prepare for it?
I took a class. They have a test prep course that actually met at Emory Law. And I took that. It was like a 6-week course that was 2 hours once a week. And then I set aside, again, I was still an undergrad, so I had the summer to study, which made a huge difference. And so I took that class during the school semester, and then I had 6 weeks between school ending in May and taking the LSAT in June, that I studied full time, like it was a job. I think someone asked in that question what at Oglethorpe helped prepare for the LSAT. And I don't know what the core program is looking like at this present moment, but I took great ideas of modern math through the core, and there's a huge formal logic component in that, and that was critical for the LSAT. I think it really put me a step ahead of people who were in the class with me and had never seen formal logic before. And I mean, I took it with Dr. Nardo, and he was particularly good at teaching it. So if he's still teaching that class, I would highly recommend it. But there's also a lot of online resources and books you can purchase to help you if like a class is not financially reasonable or time-wise reasonable. But I will say if you're concerned about the amount of time you have to study, you should probably take the next test. It's much better to, I think, defer and have like feel really prepared than to take it when you aren't ready yet.
Yeah, Anna, what you did sounds like an excellent plan. And if I had known I was going to go to law school, I probably would have done something similar in taking the time during undergrad or during the summer during undergrad to study. So I will say, for me, it was really difficult to have a good study schedule and plan while I was working full time. I didn't have well, I probably could have had the time to take a class, like a more structured class. I didn't. I used an online prep program called LSAT Max, which actually I found really helpful. I kind of did something similar to Iris, where I took it once. I kind of vaguely studied, and then I took some practice tests and took it once, and then kind of saw what things I really needed to focus on in the next time I took it. And so then after I took it the first time, I had a more structured plan using that online program, which also had an app for the phone. So you could just do like flashcards or multiple choice, things like that. They had like a daily question, which were just things to kind of keep my brain going. Like if I was on a lunch break, I could go and do some of those just to kind of stay in that zone a little bit more. So that was helpful for me. And specifically at Oglethorpe, I think if I hadn't been in my last semester of my senior year when I took Great Ideas in Modern Math, it would have been more helpful to me. The formal logic piece, I took it with Dr. Giger. She's wonderful and amazing, and I'm not a math person at all. And she did as much as she could with me. I did fine in the class, but I put it off as long as I possibly could. But yeah, I mean, I think my boyfriend, who I mentioned, was a philosophy and English major, and he said that all of the philosophy courses were really helpful to him. For me, the philosophy courses in the core were helpful, just kind of reading that sort of logic and in history as well, because I think that's part of it once you get into law school. But yeah, so I think all the things that Anna said, and then just finding what kind of study plan works for you with the time and resources that you have, because there's no one certain way that you have to do it. People have success in a lot of different ways.
Thank you. We have another question. Do grad schools in general care about undergrad grades?
I think it depends on the graduate program and what else you have in sort of your application package. So I think we touched on this a little bit talking about the GRE and the LSAT, but a lot of law schools, especially more recently, are looking at candidates from a more holistic point of view. So yes, your undergrad grades are a factor. And I think in my application, they were a pretty good factor because I had pretty good undergrad grades. And they look at that in light of your extracurricular activities or places you might have worked or interned, either post-grad or during your undergraduate career. So I don't think they're like, if your grades aren't where you'd like them to be for graduate school applications, I don't think that's a deal breaker, but they certainly help if your grades are good.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
Go for it.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but something you can look at just to get a gauge is a lot of grad schools will post kind of like the median of their previous class, like what the median GPA was. So you can get an idea. And there are a lot of resources online to tell you kind of like the range of GPAs that were accepted, if you want to go by number, but it really does depend kind of holistically. But if you can get a sense of what they generally accept, then I think it can help you feel a little bit more comfortable about kind of figuring out what is kind of a safe school, what is like a goal, and what might be a reach. But again, sometimes you have no idea the other things that go into those admission decisions.
Yeah, so the time hasn't come for me to serve in the admissions committee yet, but I hope it will, so that we can stir some stuff up when it comes to applying, but and accepting new students. But I talked to a lot of professors who have, and usually what they say, it's they, like Anna said, we look at it holistically. I think the most important factor is definitely the rec letters for at least in physics. A lot of schools care a lot about research that you've done. At least that was the case for me. Like I did like with the jury stuff, I was like, I did okay. I knew it wasn't the reason I was going to go to grad school. I just didn't want it to be the reason I didn't go to grad school. This is literally the way I saw the GRE. I suck at standardized tests. I just wanted it to be the reason why I didn't want it to be the reason why I didn't get in. And so I got a score that I needed. And mostly it was a recommendation letter. So making sure that the people who are writing my letters would write strong recommendation letters for me. And then I worked a lot on my like I don't think when it comes to grades they ask for the transcripts, but I think between the rec letters, what I wrote for them, my personal statement and everything else, I think my grades got diluted. I don't think they really looked at it. But and what I was told was that if you have something that, like for example, if you didn't do that well in the first 2 years, but then it got better, you can take the personal statement as an opportunity to explain why that happened. Say like, oh, I wasn't sure. So if there's something like obviously that there's like not your forte, they say to explain it. That's the advice I've gotten, to kind of explain what happened. Don't delve too much into it, right? But just explain what happened in your personal statement, a few sentences on it. So, but rec letters are the most important part.
Thank you. So another question we have is, how early in your undergraduate academic career should you be looking at grad school programs?
I mean, from my example, obviously you don't have to look at them at all until after you graduate. It just depends on what your path is and kind of what you're interested in. I guess, so I mean, I guess my part of that, I'll let everyone else answer otherwise. My part of it is that you don't have to know immediately that you want to go to grad school. If you don't start thinking about it until after you graduate, even after you've been working for a while, that's fine too. I think I know people who have done it both ways. I'm glad that I worked for a couple of years because I felt like when I did decide to go to grad school and to go to law school specifically, I felt a little bit more kind of focused and motivated because I had taken time and I knew that that was where I wanted to be. Thankfully, that was true after I started as well. But I know people also who, it was a career shift for them. There's someone in Evan's class who was a pediatric oncologist for years before he decided that he wasn't making enough of an impact in the world. And so he wanted to go to law school and do something, on the policy side or whatever. I guess my point is it's never too late to start thinking about it.
I think too, it's also never too early to start thinking about it. Just like there are with undergraduate institutions, there's an overwhelming amount of grad schools out there. So if you can start thinking even very early on about things like, what learning style do you like best? And do you like a small environment or a larger environment? And really prioritize those pieces that are most important to you. That's going to really help narrow your grad school search instead of just being overwhelmed by options that are all like probably pretty good. So I'd say maybe more focused, closer to your application period, maybe like a year out of when you're planning to apply at the most. But before then, you can be thinking about sort of more abstract elements.
Yeah, so I think uh so I also switched I did something for undergrad, and then I did something in the post. I changed topics, still physics, but I changed disciplines, which means how you have to meet a whole new set of people. So I think for STEM, it's not so much about the school, I would say, or the state for that matter, but who you want to work with too. So you have to give it some time for you to be able to know who would kind of be a good match, because you're going to be working with this person for at least 5 years on average. That's what they say. It's like that's how long it takes to get a PhD in physics. So you want to give that some thought. It's a big commitment, so you want to give it some thought. I would say like the summer before you want to start. I started the summer and then I applied in fall. That was a little hectic. But I guess the first step is like, do you want to go to grad school? And once you say yes, that's when you should start looking at what, like Mana mentioned, like what type of mentor do I want? Bigger schools, yeah, sure, you get bigger funds, but mentors are a lot more of like they're just not there to guide you through it unless they're starting. So it's something I to think about, I think.
Thank you. That's great advice. Another question, we often hear that networking and internships, etc., are vital to success during and after college. What first steps can you recommend in marketing ourselves and getting exposure to the workplace?
Okay, I'll go as a step because, and then maybe we should do a sandwich. One of you, then me, one of you. But I could tell you, I think the most important for us is RUs. If you're it's like a research experience for undergraduate students. So it's a summer thing. You kind of get your feet wet doing research. Research is the most important part for STEM. Let it be bio, math, chemistry, physics. You have to get research done. And these internships, you can sort of see them as internships, are pretty cool because you get paid like $5,000 during a summer. I never made $5,000 when I was in undergrad. And then you get to experience just doing research, going to a different school. For international students, it's a little bit harder because all of that is funded through the NSF. But if you reach out to, say, like, for example, if you're in Georgia, maybe you can reach out to someone in Georgia Tech who probably has grants, because once NSF gives the PAs their grants, they can do whatever they want with that money. So if they like you and you reach out to them and say, hey, I want to work with you, they can probably let you work with them. So that's what I would do, networking, going to conferences. For women, there's like undergraduate women in physics. I went 2 years in a row. It was great. And so it's important though. You definitely want to do research. So networking.
I would say that internships that I obtained through Oglethorpe were really key in sort of my journey to law school. One, because I went to law school straight out of undergrad. So I sort of needed to fill in those resume gaps of professional experience. And I got to do that from the internships that I had. I worked as an intern at the Harland Charitable Foundation for 2 years. And that was a great experience in working in an office and professionalism, and sort of delving into what work life is like day to day that you don't often see in college or in grad school. And I also thought it was very helpful to get internships that helped confirm my decision to go to grad school. So working with the Georgia Innocence Project, or I worked for an attorney the summer after my freshman year. It's all sort of, for law school in particular, not everyone, in fact, most people don't have any legal work experience before they go to law school. So it's really not required, but it can be helpful in making sure that that's what you really want to do. because law school is a lot of work, and it's not worth it if that's not really what you want to do.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, I did an internship of all places with the Atlanta Shakespeare Tavern when I was at Oglethorpe. But even that, I mean, though it wasn't directly related to law school now, I think any kind of experience, professional experience, work experience you can get is really helpful. I think just having, for applying to grad school and for, internships or, positions during the summer while you're in grad school, having some kind of work experience is really helpful. So anything you can get on that side. I think, the events that Oglethorpe puts on through the Alumni Association and the Career Center, all of those are really great opportunities just to get used to networking with people and kind of get used to having those conversations, because it can kind of be a little strange if you haven't done a lot of it. But, just being able to, well, you're not walking up to anybody right now, probably because we're all in our homes and dorms and everything, but just starting a conversation with someone. I've actually gotten a lot of LinkedIn requests from current Oglethorpe students in this past semester, which is great. I don't know how they found me, but that's great. And I'm happy to accept them. And that's a great thing too, is just kind of having that presence, particularly online, just because that's kind of where everyone is right now. The only thing I would say about that is LinkedIn has a feature where you can also send a little bit of a note to kind of say, hey, this is who I am. And for me, like I would love to see that as well, just to know a little bit more about who the person is and like how I can be helpful to them, or, if it's not me directly, who I can connect them with that I know who could help them, with whatever. And just the informal networking, like either through LinkedIn or through email after you meet them at a panel like this, or, a career fair or something, saying, hey, can we, have a quick coffee on Zoom or whatever it is, or, once life gets back to some kind of normal, meet for coffee or meet for lunch. I've never had anybody say, no, I'm not going to meet with you and just talk about my experience. People are generally always happy to share kind of what's worked for them and see how they can help you, because none of us and none of them got to where they are without a ton of people along the way. So I think most people that I know absolutely want to kind of pay that forward.
Thank you. We have, what is something that you wish you knew prior to embarking on your professional pursuits?
I guess I wish, just for my own sanity, I wish that I like the way that it turned out for me, but I wish I had known that law school was something I was interested in while I was in college, because I probably would have done something like Anna did and studied and taken the LSAT then, because those scores, I don't know if it's the same for the GRE, but your LSAT scores can actually last for, I think it's like 3 or 5 years. Anna, you can correct me if I'm totally wrong, but
I think it's 5.
Yeah, it's for several years after you take it. So I probably would have tried to use that time that I had to study during the summer in undergrad or something like that, or take an actual course and then take the test and kind of be able to use that score, even if I, continued to work for a couple of years after I graduated and then went to law school. I think that's what I would have done differently.
Yeah, I think that's a hard question, because like even many of the things that I have failed at have been huge pushers to where I am today. So I think maybe I would want to be a little bit more sure of myself in law school. When I got there, I was just flabbergasted that they had let me into this great school. And I think I spent a lot of time that I didn't need to, questioning like how I made it there. When the fact of the matter is, like, I was there and I needed to make the best of that opportunity. So I will say, just like going from like a small school like Oglethorpe, which is wonderful and magnificent in a million ways, to a huge school was a big adjustment. And I guess I would have liked to have better coping strategies on how to transition.
Yeah, I 100% agree with. It's a hard question. I don't think I would have done anything differently. I you know I got to live in New York for 2 years. Then in the midst of a crazy pandemic, I moved to New Haven, which is a lot better than New York when you're talking about COVID. I think the only thing I would say is that summer between when grad school started, well, this summer, it's kind of hard because COVID, but I wish I had taken it a little bit lighter. Um, Everyone told me, like, you don't want to burn out during that period of time. Just like I was supposed to go back home and have a relaxing vacation, but instead because that didn't happen, I kept working. And then so I didn't get that big of a resting time between my full-time work as a researcher and then just coming as a grad student. So yeah, if you do this, enjoy that summer, definitely. That's what I would say.
Thank you. So now we have some time for more virtual questions from the crowd. If anyone would like to introduce themselves and ask their question, and provide your class year or what you're majoring in, that'd be nice. Feel free. I could always just ask the questions in the chat. Okay, so I'll just ask the questions from the chat. Anisha asked, for Anna and Katherine, can you explain what the law school application process is like? What are the parts? What should I focus on? And how what law school I want to attend?
Yeah, so like we've talked about, the LSAT is obviously part of the application. And then in my experience, it also included a personal statement and submitting kind of the usual, my resume and my undergrad transcript. And Emory also, I think this probably maybe fairly common for law school, but because you are going into a field where you'll ultimately take the bar, and you also have to pass kind of like a character and fitness test or exam to make sure that you are suited to practice law. There was also a place for disclosure of any, either in your undergrad, any academic or conduct violation kind of things, or if you had any, any brushes with the law before law school, even if it's something like a traffic ticket or something, just so you disclose those things so that the school knows about those going ahead, and that that's kind of a practice for you to be disclosing anything for the character and fitness part of the bar exam once you graduate. And so those are the main parts of the application. Emory didn't have an interview, but they did have a lot of admitted students events for incoming students. And so those were opportunities where you could go. I'm sure they're doing something like that online now, but you could go and just get a better sense for the school. You could go on a tour, ask any questions that you have. And they were really good about kind of trying to make a personal connection with the students, even in just the application process, and really get to know who you were and stay connected to you, kind of be on a first name basis, which I was really impressed by. Though I didn't apply to multiple law schools, Evan did, and that was not his experience at all of the schools he applied to and that we visited. So that was something that was important to me. And it's sort of a smaller community, which I had enjoyed about Oglethorpe. And I wanted to continue to be able to have those close relationships with faculty members and with my classmates. So that was something that stood out to me. And I see your question as well, what should I focus on to wow the law school I want to attend? I think, I mean, you'll probably wow them anyway, just with what you do. If there's some place that you're really, really interested in and you really want to make an impact with your application, I guess I would recommend looking at their website and kind of the programs that they have and the things that they focus on. If it's something where they have, a focus on pro bono work, so kind of public service or public interest work, like Anna's interested in going into, if you can show some, I guess if you have an experience that's connected to that, that shows your interest in the same kind of work, or you have a passion for a certain area, I think it's more about you than it is about the law school. So I think, showing that you have, demonstrating an interest in law and why, not just, I want to go to law school because I'm not sure what else I should do right now. But why you want to be there and why you want, I think this is true of jobs as well, but why you want to go to that school specifically. So what makes them unique that you think it would be a good fit on both sides? I think that's what I would focus on.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that and just add that some schools have optional essay questions. And if you would like to get into that school, you should answer that optional essay question. They sort of use it as a way to feel out whether or not you're actually interested in them, or if you're just applying to a bunch of schools and they happen to be on your list.
Another thing that just came to mind, because last year I did work as a student tour guide at Emory Law for prospective students, that if you do have the opportunity to visit the school and go on a tour like that and meet people there, obviously you're going to be engaged and show interest, but it would always stand out to me if a student followed up with me after the tour or something, or like had additional questions, or just send a thank you note or something, because I don't think I had any sway really, but I would always tell the admissions office then, like, oh, they were really great, they sent a note, they we had a good connection, and they put the effort in, kind of thing. So all the things that you would probably want someone to do if you took the time to give them a tour or talk to somebody about your experience or where you are, but just make sure that you're doing that. It's just the little things that may not tip the scale completely, but they can help.
Well, great advice. Another question, is there financial aid available at private institutions?
Yes, at Emory there is. Emory Law is actually pretty generous with their scholarships as a rule. And I know that that's often one of the reasons that people decide to go there. And you're automatically considered for those scholarships with your application. They also have I think it's called a Woodruff Fellowship or something, but that's one full scholarship that they offer every year, which you have to apply for separately. But everything else, those merit scholarships, you're automatically considered for.
So one of the really cool things about getting a PhD, not a master's, but a PhD in STEM, is that it's actually free for the student. Not only is it free, but you actually get a stipend because you're supposed to work as a TA or doing research. And so for most schools, like I think every school, if you're getting a PhD in math, bio, chemistry, or physics, or computer science, I think, maybe not computer science, but you don't have to worry about it. You are covered by the first 2 years, you're covered by the school because you're going to work as a TA. And then the last, however long, 3-4 years after that, you are covered by your advisor or your PI with their grants. So yeah, you don't have to worry about it. There are other stuff that you can apply to. So there's some fellowships and some scholarships that you can apply to, and those are pretty cool. If you get one, NSF has one. It's basically, it allows you to be fully funded by, I don't know how many years. And that way it gives you a more competitive edge because schools don't have to worry about funding you. You're already funded yourself. So yeah.
I would just to tag onto that, I think part of a question earlier was how is undergrad different from law school? So that kind of thing with a typical master's or PhD program where you're working as a TA is definitely a difference, I think. One thing that I think sort of in the structure of law school, it's a little bit more similar to undergrad, just because we don't work as TAs. To undergrad students. You can be a TA for other classes within the law school, but you are not working separately to teach your own classes kind of thing while you're doing your graduate degree. So in that way, the format is more similar to what you're doing now and attending classes, and you may be doing internships, or you could be a research assistant for a professor or a TA for another class within the law school. But that's a difference from other grad programs.
Another question we have is, how did you make the decision that grad school was the right path, and how did you decide which program was right for you?
For law school, it's a pretty easy answer because you can't be a lawyer if you don't go to law school. But I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. Yeah, unless there's a weird law in California that I think only Kim Kardashian is taking advantage of. But that was a huge part of it for me. Again, I'd have a biased answer because I knew pretty early on that I wanted to be an attorney. But in terms of deciding what program was right for me, I was really concerned with the faculty at programs that I was looking at. Michigan law has incredible professors who have clerked on the Supreme Court or been long-term attorneys or like are leaders in their scholastic fields. And that was huge for me. And I also was really invested in having a great community. We call it at Michigan the quote Michigan difference. And I've certainly seen that. A lot of law schools can be hyper competitive, and Michigan is competitive. It's a top 10 program, but people are super kind to each other and always willing to lend a hand. And that was really critical in my decision making.
Yeah, I think all those things are true. Actually, of my experience at Emory as well, I was looking a lot, like I said, I was looking a lot at the faculty and the size of the school and the community as well. I didn't want a place that was going to be super cutthroat and super competitive, which I think is, I know there are still law schools out there that are like that, but fortunately, I think there's sort of a trend to be like more humane to each other, and I've definitely experienced that. And in my decision to go to grad school, since I didn't know when I graduated, I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do, or trying to figure out what I wanted to do next when I was working for the nonprofit. And I looked a lot, I kind of was thinking about the type of work that I like to do or that I could see myself doing. And a lot of that was kind of research and writing and critical thinking. I like to problem solve for people, but I like rules as well. And so all of the things those were all things that had sort of been with me in the classes that I took and extracurriculars that I did in one way or another. And it kind of just felt like the skills and interests that I had were intersecting at law school and what I could do as a lawyer, and that I had, I believe that I have the skills to kind of be in that sort of specialized field and be useful to people in that way. So that's why I decided to go.
So kind of think back on when I was an undergrad and why, and I'm trying to come up with a better reason than my advisor was like, you need to go to grad school. But I think most of it, I'll give you, so I used to be I was an engineering major first. So if you're an engineer, most people say you don't need to go to grad school, right? Because it's like this thing for physics, it depends on what you want to do. So if you don't want to be a professor or you don't want to be a researcher, you probably don't need to go to grad school. But I went to a conference in I think 2016, and it was in Georgia Tech. And I saw how much research was being done there, and it was great. And they called it, and I think this is really funny, they say that physics, they said this, quoting them, that physics is the liberal arts school. It's like the liberal arts part of STEM, and it's really versatile, and it allows you to do different things. Like there's physicists who work at finance, there's physicists who work at law. There's different things that you can do with a physics major, because this idea of being a problem solver goes beyond just here's some equations, here's something I need to figure out in the universe or and so I think part of it is when you get the PhD and going to graduate school, that opens the door it opened the door for me to do more things. And as I kept doing research, I really like doing research. So I was like, this is where I'm going. And the progression is pretty simple. Like the steps are there. What do you want to do? Do you want to be a professor? I want to be a postdoc. It's somewhat linear. So that's comforting. You know what's next. But that's how it went down. I wish I had a better reason. I like research, and the only way I could keep doing research is if I go to grad school. So I went to grad school. I did a postdoc, and then I went to grad school. So here I am taking classes so that I can do research again.
I would say too, talking to people who are in that type of grad program that you're interested in and seeing if, what they say is something that you're interested in doing. I mean, part of my decision was that I was watching Evan do his first year law school stuff, and I was like wishing that I was doing that as well, because I was really interested in it and I felt like I'd be really good at it. And now I'm overwhelmed by doing that kind of work, and there's a ton of it. But I'm still, at the end of the day, I'm so glad I'm here. And I think it's helpful. I hope this is helpful to you guys for helping to decide if that's something you're interested in. But even if it's not law or physics, I know we're a little bit limited, reaching out to either us, we might know other students from Oglethorpe who are doing different types of grad programs, or to the alumni office, career center, and just talking to them about like day to day, what's it like and what are the doors that it opens for you to be doing this program. Just that sort of thing, so you get a better firsthand account.
Thank you. We had a question from Amanda for Iris. She asked, are there other opportunities you might suggest for research for STEM students who are also international students?
Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of a pickle when I was doing this, is that most of the RUs are just for citizens or residents. I think that there are some programs you might have to do a deep dive a little bit of, like that they do also accept international students. I think reaching out to PIs direct, like professors or researchers directly, might also help. I know that they take some students, but they're also really busy, so they might not reply. That's a problem that I've had with professors here. Doing something like a postbac is great. It really exposes you to you get a really big experience, and it's different. It depends on what you're trying to do. I know that bridge programs usually have, I would say, I advocate for bridge programs, so that's why I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. They only not do physics, they mostly do STEM. So there's schools like Columbia has one, Vanderbilt has one. California, some schools in California have bridge programs. I think that's something that you might want to look into. Otherwise, I would say try looking for RUs that specifically target international students, but they tend to be competitive. But I would say reach out to professors individually. They might have a better idea, or they might even tack you on if they like you. Just reach out, like they've been saying. And sometimes you don't lose anything by reaching out. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Searching through the questions. Sorry. I think we have time for like 2 more questions. Should recommendation letters be from people related to your major or programming you're applying to?
I received advice when I was applying to law school that your three recommendations letters should all speak to different facets of what you're like as a candidate. So one person to speak to your academic abilities, one person to speak to you as a human individual, your character, and then a third recommender to speak to what you're like in a collaborative environment. And I found that advice to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think I've heard similar things just about having your recommendations come from different places, even, so kind of an academic environment, a work environment, that sort of thing. But just so you're not getting information just all from one source. As to whether it has to be someone in law or in, whatever field, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think, if you do have something that's really specific that speaks to your skills in that area, that's great. But it's not required. I think they want to just have an outside perspective from someone who knows you well, who knows kind of what you're like in, either in the classroom or as an employee or an intern. Just a broader picture or a more detailed picture than they'll get from just looking at your application and your resume. So anybody, someone who you feel like is going to give you a strong recommendation, and you can ask them too, like, do you feel that you can write me a strong recommendation? And if they say no, don't use them. They're not going to want to write a bad rec for you. They would probably rather you ask someone else. And a lot of people will be candid about that, I think, because they will.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. When I did mine, I had two mentors, so I immediately asked the two of them, and then my undergrad advisor, just people who knew me really well. I think sort of what Anna was saying, one of them talked about me as a researcher, the other one talked to me more about how I was as a student in undergrad, so I think most of it is, Katherine also mentioned it was how that they're going to write you a strong letter, because I think a weak letter sometimes just says more, and so you just want to make sure you add the, can you write a strong recommendation letter there when you ask them, and they say no, that's okay. But I think your advisor is always a good idea, someone who knows you pretty well. Sometimes people go to professors. I had this, people say this story about, like, there's always professors who are at Columbia. There's a professor who was famous, and everyone went for him for his letters of recommendation, but he wouldn't even remember your name. So then he would just write the same generic letter for everyone, and it lost its power because he didn't really know them, and so it didn't mean as much as writing. It's like your advisor who really knows you, who saw you grow, who saw you struggle and whatnot, and can really attest to what you want to do. Because at the end, at least in physics, it's when you go to grad school, it's a commitment for both people, and they just want to make sure that you'll stick to it. And so that's the biggest and the most important part of the rec letters.
Okay, thank you all for the advice you've given us today, and for everyone attending, and a big thank you to our panelists. A recording of today's conversation will be available soon, as well as the bios and information for all our panelists, so students can contact anyone of the panelists for extra advice or any questions that were left unanswered. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your evening.